much concerned about the articles that are opening the door for all the NGOs interference. As far as, NGOs are Gavi, for example, and all the organizations that are not elected, and lobbyists, etc. And there's an article, I think maybe 51, an amendment that allows them to be a part of the consideration, a part of the recommendation, etc. And I think that's going to be a major problem, which is very important to maybe show to the public, especially in Israel. In Israel, I can say that the main discussion now is about the lobbyists in other aspects. So if we can show that this opens a huge door for interference of corporate interference, etc., maybe it would make a difference. So I would like to hear your point of view about that. And also, do you think that the IHR would be able to affect the climate crisis sanctions as far as, that it would be able to define it as a health situation? That's my questions. James and or Philip.
I'll be happy to cede the floor to Philip, if he's here.
Philip, Cruz, would you like to?
Yes, I will gladly answer after James.
Hi.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Oh, so James, that's actually great. First James,
Oh, but I have a lot of information, Philip. So you might want to go first.
Philip Cruz is a lawyer. He's an attorney, and he's very much active and familiar with the new amendments, the IHR amendments for the WHO. And yeah, so go ahead.
Yes, thank you very much, Gal, for asking me this question, and thank you very much for holding this Zoom. I just respond to this question because I'm here not as the speaker. Main speaker is Marcus and James, of course. But now this is an important point here. The question, to what degree will the recommendations have to be considered as legally binding? And you mentioned one provision where you can see that, but this is by far not the only one. And you are making reference to the definition Article 1, which I will gladly show all these provisions next time when I will have the floor. In the Article 1, you see the definitions where it says, standing recommendations means non-binding recommendations, and the word non-binding is crossed out. And from that amendment, actually, all of our activist groups have taken the justification to say, oh, look, it will become binding. But there are two more provisions. They are much more powerful. Now I'm sitting here without the rest of my equipment, but I think it's, I will show next time, 43A and another one where it explicitly says at two different occasions that actually all kinds of recommendations, whether they are intermediary recommendations or recommendations during an emergency, they will have to be followed and will have to be executed as soon as possible. And with a bit time, if James would, while James will ask, I will bring forward my slides. I can tell you exactly the provisions. And then you will have the execution part within these international health regulations, new provisions, which attempt actually to make sure that within the countries, all new provisions, including recommendations, will have to be executed. This is so crystal clear. This is so crystal clear that without any doubt, we must say that in the future, once these new health recommendations will have legal force, legal binding force, these recommendations will have to be considered as legally binding. And as we all know, already in the past, as they were just non-binding recommendations, they were considered equally to almost military orders. At least within Europe, they were executed when it comes to how to test the gravity of the virus and how to respond to the virus with what kind of measures. There was no choice of different vaccines, different types of vaccines. There was just mRNA. And Tedros said at one point that 70% vaccination rate in all countries. This is an imperative, a global imperative that he said already in the past. That shows the spirit, that shows the attitude of how the highest people within WHO, they think and they are approaching this topic. So please, James, you certainly know the exact provisions. Is it 43A, something like that? I give it over to James.
Yeah, there are actually many provisions that do that. If I may, I'd like to say hi and thank you to Marcus and share something here, just if I may. I learned about your effort, and I'm pretty sure I'm on the same page. This ought to look familiar, and this was your group's declaration. Am I correct? Okay. Please do put the your contact information so we can get better connected. That would be great. I'd love to have that.
I write you something on Twitter. We can exchange information.
Okay.
Follow me, and now I follow you. We will do that.
Okay. One of the things that I'm very concerned about, and I think it's very powerful, but yet people are not seeing the power. It's great that you have here say no to the WHO treaty and say no to the amendments, but the deadline for the amendments to reject the amendments that were adopted last year is December 1st. And people respond to deadlines. And I would encourage everyone to get up to speed on the simple fact that last year they did adopt amendments. And we have approximately 4 months, August, September, October, November, to reject them. Now, whether or not any nation actually, their leader has the guts to do that, and I'll give you a lot of information about that in a moment, getting the people to be aware that we've lost our sovereignty 75 years ago when we put it into the hands of the WHO, and in 1969 and 2005, when we put it in their hands to make decisions, to amend international health regulations, and there is no requirement that our people or our parliament have anything to say about it. Well, that's what's going to happen with the 300 plus amendments. Andrew Bridgen spoke up in Parliament about a month ago, and he asked a very straightforward question. He said, you know, are we, and if so, when are we going to get an opportunity to vote on the amendments? And I was pleased that he asked that, but I was disappointed because what I wished he would have said is to the health minister, dear, UK health minister, last year, the United Kingdom government, along with the US and European Union and Australia and Japan and Monaco and a bunch of others, submitted amendments to the World Health Assembly, which were adopted. And nobody ever asked the people, nobody ever mentioned anything to Parliament. We've gone 14 months and you have no intention of asking us. When are you going to ask us to comment on this? And I heard clearly the answer that was given, but I think everybody else heard something else. The health minister, in my language, and maybe it'll translate, maybe it won't, but the health minister pretty much said, and again, I'm making this up, oh, Andrew, you silly wanker, you don't get to decide. We've already decided. You have no say in the matter. The deep state, the bureaucracy, the civil servants, the diplomats, the delegates, the government, and we don't listen to you anymore. We listen to the WHO and the WEF and the UN and whoever's behind them. You think you get to vote at the World Health Assembly? Andrew, you're so confused. You might get to vote on legislation that we tell you you have to pass in order to implement whatever we agree to, but you have no say in the matter in terms of what we agree to. We're in charge, you're not. Go back home to your district and talk to your people because none of you matter. We don't listen to you, we listen to them. Now that's the whole point of the petitions in Canada and Australia and New Zealand, and there's a petition in Germany I'd like to ask you about. I don't know, are you at all connected to or aware of or familiar with this particular petition?
Yeah, heard of it, shared it. Let me look it up.
I don't read a good bit of German, but I think this means they got 74,000.
Yeah, it has 74,000 people who signed it.
Okay.
But there are some of those petitions, but at least they have to, if you have more than 50,000, they have to discuss this in a committee in our Bundestag, in our parliament. But normally they ignore it, but 75,000 is not that much. Could be more, should be more.
Okay, now I have a world of things that I could share with everybody, but I don't know what your schedule is. I'll put a bunch of information in the chat, and I think it would probably make sense for us to schedule a time where I could give you more information.
Yes, I think so, James. I think it'll make sense to have
Okay.
another hour with you.
I'm
Very soon.
gonna put some info.
James, can I just ask, like, well, go back actually for my to my question from before. I mean, I understand what Philip said about the non-binding and or binding actually recommendation, which is very important what he added, the comment, for me at least. But I do want to ask you about the situation with the NGOs that are in the new amendments, and also the effect, if you think that there will be an effect on like a climate health situation to these new amendments or new regulation. Because as far as I can remember, it includes climate health situation. It's very wide, the definition. Am I right?
Well, first and foremost, things are getting mixed together in the question. Okay. So let me try to separate a few things, and I'll try to limit the time. If you look in the chat, I would hope everyone can save the chat. There's some really important stuff in there, and maybe we can schedule a time to talk about that soon. Okay, way too much information. In the WHO CA+ Framework Convention, which most people call the treaty, but it's not a frickin' treaty, right? It's not going to be, you sign, you agree to a bunch of words, you agree to them, you sign it, and you're done. The purpose is to set up an ongoing scenario where there's a conference of the parties that could agree in secret without anyone having any say about it off into the future forever to protocols as to the details. And so your question, I think, applies very clearly to Article 19 of that document, which says they want donations. They want to, they want to fund that ongoing effort with the nations giving money, taxpayer money, if you will, with companies that manufacture pandemic response products, all of the United Nations organizations, which currently donate a lot of money to the WHO, and all of the non-government organizations, the Bill and Melinda Gates and all of the other foundations. They're calling upon all of them to fund up to $30 billion a year, which is what they say they want. But who would be in charge of distributing that money other than the very same people? It's built-in conflict of interest. It's corruption. It's a cabal of unknown bureaucrats who are unaccountable to anybody, who would set up a cartel not to do any of the things that anybody thinks this document does. This document does not do the stuff you're thinking about. That's in the amendments. The WHOCA plus Framework Convention would just simply invest billions of dollars in the pharmaceutical hospital emergency industrial complex. They want to build a laboratory network all throughout the world to be able to use their One Health method to test everybody, everywhere, everything, every farm, every chicken coop, every veterinarian's office. If they could pretend to find some genetic sequence with their fake PCR tests, and now they have a whole nother thing called NATs, N-A-A-T-S, you're going to be hearing about that soon. They want to be able to fearmonger the same way they did over the last 3 to 4 years. And so the treaty is not what people think it is. It's a business venture. It's a venture capitalist prospectus. And they want the people who donate the money to be in charge of distributing them and controlling the money. It's just flat out fascist corruption. Now, to answer your question about, binding or non-binding, Philip, you and I haven't really had a chance to talk about this, so you'll hear it here first because we just haven't had a chance to get together and talk. I'm very concerned that the things that we've seen in the documents that we've been allowed to see that have not changed since they were submitted in September, I have a suspicion, I can't prove it, it's a gut feeling, that the egregiously bad stuff, like changing non-binding to binding and wiping out our dignity, human rights, and fundamental freedoms and so forth, I think a lot of that is a decoy. It's a ruse. I think it's already been wiped out. I think any attack on sovereignty has been wiped out. I think they're getting us to pay attention to that because they've been negotiating since September, and we have not seen a new version of the proposed amendments. And I think they're very different than what we're focused on. Okay. And so what I think they want is actually in the document, in Annex 1 and Annex 10 and amendments to Article 13, it's all about investing in what they call core capacity. They want an enormous investment in the pharmaceutical hospital emergency industrial complex. They just want money to flow into building up the capacity that they used to abuse everyone over the last 3 to 4 years. Now, I've got a lot of stuff going on. There's things happening in Canada, in Trinidad and Tobago, in the UK. The UK is 1,000 signatures shy of getting 100,000. There's a lot of things going on. I'm actually very optimistic. Let's schedule a time, where I could lay all of this out on you. Things are happening all over the world, but I got to give you an alert to what's happening tomorrow, the next day, and the next day. There's actually 4 things that are going on. There's the amendments last year, the amendments that are in hiding this year. Let me share my screen and I can show and tell rather than just tell. This is the information that I just put in the chat for everybody, and hopefully you can see what I'm sharing, I trust. Yes?
Yes, we can, yeah.
Okay, so here's all my contact information. I invite everybody to give me a call tomorrow and Tuesday. They're having a final reading of the United Nations Political Declaration. The 0 draft of that is in the list of things that I sent you. It's a 14-page document that, for all intents and purposes, they just copied it from the proposed 0 draft. Yeah, it seems like they copied it from the 0 draft, not the newer version. And it's the only document that I've seen where they actually say they want $30 billion a year. And so they're going to place that under what they call the silence procedure. And they have every plan on adopting it on September 20th. So maybe that's 7 weeks, most of August and most of September, not quite 2 months, where every nation will have the opportunity to comment and say, oh, no, we don't like it. Okay. But if they're silent, their silence is seen as consent. Now, the two nations, and this might be an answer to your question, the two nations who are the co-facilitators of the negotiations towards this political declaration happen to be Morocco and Israel. And so they have your ambassador and their ambassador have been facilitating these discussions for this document, which on Wednesday is going to be submitted. The final text will be submitted to all the 193 nations of the UN. It's not the WHO, it's the UN. And they plan on adopting it on September 20th. So this is probably news to most people. This deadline here is a very hard deadline. I got this information from the Joint Standing Committee on Treaties in Australia. My good friends in Australia have just published a letter to their secretariat of the Joint Standing Committee on Treaties, because they had a petition in May and June that got 55,000 signatures, and they're demanding a discussion about the amendments that were adopted last year. Australia, along with the United Kingdom and the US and the EU, actually submitted those amendments last year. Most people are blissfully unaware. And so Australia submitted them, and there's been 14 months since they were adopted, and nobody bothered to ask the Australian people or the Australian Parliament. And so, they have now the attention of the Joint Standing Committee on Treaties, and we're right in the middle right now of sending thousands of emails to that secretariat of that committee to get them to have an inquiry. Okay. Now, right after that, in mid-January, the 300 plus amendments are scheduled to be submitted to the WHO. We're not talking about May, because with the amendments, they have to submit them 4 months in advance of May. So the timeline for discussion about these amendments that are just completely secret, since they were submitted in September, is very soon going to be upon us. Most people take the holidays off. They're going to have this deadline for December 1, and then boom, they have to complete the negotiations for the amendments by mid-January. Okay, and then obviously, May is that. Now, there's a compilation text for the WHO Framework Convention that has been kept completely in secret. There's 208 pages of text that have been submitted. And I've published some articles about how many of the nations are very unhappy that their submissions were ignored. Their submission is in the hidden compilation text, but it's not in the Bureau's text, which is the working document that they're purported to be negotiating. There has been no updated version of the negotiated amendments, and I'm very concerned that the things that we think we know about it are just a big old decoy. And then the last thing I mentioned, the silence procedure, we're about to enter into that period. And if you go to exitthewho.org, there's 25 countries that I've personally been working with people there. So, it is a worldwide movement. And so let's schedule a time, and, whenever you guys are available, I'll be happy to give you all the additional details. In Trinidad and Tobago, a group there just published an 8-page open letter in their local newspaper to the Prime Minister. I'm lucky enough to know somebody who knows somebody who is the cousin of the prime minister, and they're having a party at their house right now. So I know that there's going to be a meeting between activists and the prime minister in Trinidad and Tobago. They've done fantastic work. I haven't published it yet, but I shared the unpublished draft, so y'all can see that. It's all in there, and a lot of other information, but I'll stop talking.
All right, thank you very much.
What do you think we can do from here to help one reach to the public in Israel, and maybe also promote the critical discussion in general in the international community, because we are so limited here. The public is completely distracted with other stuff, and there is no public debate on it. So each of you, if you can make comments on that, I think it would be very helpful. Thank you.
With everyone I've ever talked to, and with all respect to what you just said, that's what everybody says. Okay? And I go, okay, great. I hear you. Step number one is for you to learn what the facts actually are, because there's a lot of misinformation out there. When you know what the facts are, some of those facts will trigger something in your gut that will make it so that you cannot remain silent. And then the job is to invite other people to learn what's going on, right? Hey, did you know that Israel just secretly put forth a document that's going to be adopted by the United Nations on September 20th, and nobody's ever been told about it? Are you concerned about that? If they say, nah, I don't care, I have other problems, then move on. You might need to share it with 200 people before they go, what? I didn't hear about that. Tell me more. Work with the willing. Don't try to convince. You've got a large group here. You've got 97 people here. This is the largest, this is like about the largest group put together. You guys are doing better than most everyone else in the world. So for you to say the Israeli population doesn't care, doesn't know, is distracted, I beg to differ. You guys are doing great. If there's 100 people here, and each of you tell as many people as you can, and you go, if I tell everybody I know, and I find one or two more people who are curious, bring them in and we'll get them up to speed, and then they will know. Work with the willing. Don't try to convince the people who don't want to know.
Yeah, thanks, James. It is indeed a difficult situation, I would say, and I don't know. And a lot of questions here on the chat also focus on this, constantly asking, people are asking, how can we break the silo? How can we break that wall of silence? Because we're also seeing that the government ignores us. Marcus mentioned, for example, that he wrote to his parliament and he got some responses. I know as well from Tamara Tuminen, that she also wrote letters to the Finnish parliament and she got responses. In Israel, they literally ignore us. There is one question that I would like to ask as well, so maybe some tips, because it seems like we have an opportunity to go and speak to one parliament member in Israel this week. And how would you guys advise us to address this? If you have some tips or ideas or thoughts, and maybe this is more of a question to Philip, because you've been more in touch with politicians on the European level, but yeah,
yes.
Go ahead. Yes.
Absolutely. I also wanted to respond to this previous question, and it goes into each other.
Yes,
I hope you can hear me.
Yes, loud and clear.
Yes. So this is exactly what James said is absolutely correct. We have the same situation in all of our countries, meaning that the official media, the politics, they don't speak about these new changes, amendments in the international health regulations and the new pandemic treaty. This is simply not a topic. And when it becomes a topic, then under the title of oh, we have some hysterical activists who make the case that WHO wants to establish a new World Health Order, and then they just, for the sake of good order, they put the microphone towards a professor, an ordinary professor, who would then say, oh, well, this process of negotiation is still going on. We cannot say anything about an ongoing negotiation process. And by the way, nothing of that will be legally binding, so don't worry. And the topic is off. So how do we bring the special dimension of the problem, which is actually that we have so severe, significant consequences for our constitutional order? That's the main problem. Once WHO will decide that we will have a public health emergency of international concern, and yes, Gal, it can be called out just for climate change purposes, for concern in order to deal with the higher rising level of CO2. This is indeed a scenario that will become closer. We have already some hints in Germany where politicians make out the case that they might have to activate crisis plans because of this tremendous heat, which is absolutely nothing special in Germany right now compared to other years. Yes, once WHO will decide to just speak out into the microphone this magic word of public health emergency of international concern, they will have magic powers. And so these magic powers, first thing is that we will have no such thing as separation of powers, of checks and balances of each of our national countries. The population will have nothing to say about the measures. As we mentioned already, recommendations will become legally binding. So, and one thing that is probably was mentioned already, we have the total ownership of information control by WHO, with the right to censor people and to apply all the, let's say, the tools of behavioral science, which is the science of how to manipulate people. All of this kicks in just right after this communication of public health emergency of international concern. So this, in fact, means that the door is open to any time suspend the validity of each of our constitutions in parallel. So what do we say as lawyers, as constitutional lawyers? We say, yes, James Rogosky, this is right what you said, this answer from the British government to Andrew Bridgen. They say, Andrew Bridgen, we will not ask the population because we have this mechanism of how to amend treaties, how to amend international health regulations. If all is in a formal order, we don't have to ask the population. What we as constitutional lawyers, what we have to say, and I will, once I will be given the opportunity to make the presentation here, I will actually show that all these amendments, how exactly they will have an impact on our constitutional order. And I will come to the conclusion or prove you that as a result, we will find these amendments to the international health regulations to be the biggest change of our constitutions since they were established. So that as a consequence, of course, we have to involve the people, we have to involve our parliaments. There must be a public debate. Now, and your question was how to initiate this debate. Here in Switzerland, I have drafted for a member of parliament, I've drafted a set of questions from the member of parliament to the government with respect to the amendment of the international health regulations, basically directed at pointing the finger at the weakest part. And this is how actually, it were 10 or 15 questions, how actually will Swiss government make sure that in case that the emergency is not called out for
any fake reason how Swiss government will make sure that there is a reassessment as soon as possible about whether or not we live under an emergency, and so on and so on. And so this list of questions I have made available to my colleagues in Austria, to the colleagues in Germany, and I'm about to translate it into English to make it available to members of parliament in the EU Parliament. And of course, I'm more than happy to share it with you as well, because this is not just a list of questions, but is also in the same time a simple way of becoming educated about the content of the international health regulations. So this is our hope is to trigger a parliamentary debate by asking these questions. These questions must be responded according to your constitutional process. In Switzerland, it is 30 days. Then these questions must be responded. If a member of parliament asks these questions, the government must respond. And probably they cannot, to the least, make the case that they have a minimum control over their own sovereignty and over their own public health policy as soon as WHO declares a public health emergency of international concern. But I must say, as also James said, this is a wide topic. We should take some time both for James' presentation, for my presentation, because I don't want to confuse anybody here, and I don't want to frustrate anybody here. There are valid tools how we can bring this topic onto the parliamentary floor where it must be discussed. Because once we start to modify our constitutions, it would be a circumvention to just do it via this fake international health regulations mechanism. It must be done in accordance to what your national constitution defines for the procedure that must be respected to modify your Israel constitution. And this is what I would like to explain in more detail when you have the time once of the next Sundays. So, thank you for your attention.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Yes, we are trying to indeed bring this up as a set of questions to the member of parliament. The only, I'm saying it between quotes, minor issue that we're facing is that they are, first of all, in Israel, there is no constitution. There is just a set of what's called basic laws, which are kind of like hodgepodge kind of constitution. And they are going into recess within, I think, 2 to 3 weeks. Please correct me if I'm wrong on the chat, some people that are involved in this. So we are trying, and they are expected to be back somewhere around the beginning of October. So that is already much late into our schedule.
But if I can add 2 things. If the politicians ignore you, that at least what you should do, you should tell this and show this to public. Because if they were asked question and have no answer, then bring it into public. Hey, we ask you this, we ask you that. Why do you don't give us an answer? This is working very well. We did this at the beginning of 2020. So I just ask questions, and if you don't have an answer, people get to think. If you just say you have to do this and I'm right and blah blah blah, it's not that good than asking questions. And so if they ignore you, show the people that they ignore you. And I want to add something from our legal system, so-called legal system. There was on our federal constitutional court, there was a complaint, and somebody tries to get against this international health regulations and the so-called pandemic treaty. And our highest court did nothing. It just rejected this without any reason. So this is how this works in Germany. But like I said before, it's a lot about public opinion, and we have to show the people what they are doing. The more people we have who see that our system is not working anymore, and for Germany, I can say this in 100%, it does not work anymore, the better this is. So we still have time. It's not about in 1 or 2 months, this is all over. They try. We should be active, and we should tell this to politicians and the public. But like I said before, this is a long fight.
There's 2 ways to try to get people to learn. There's the lecturing method. Oh, you should know this and you should do this, or the Socratic method of asking questions. And, you know, I've hit on the same thing that I think Marcus is alluding to. I put a document in the chat here, Dear Senator, okay? Obviously it's for the United States, but if you write a letter to, I guess to a member of the Knesset, and you ask questions, not because you think it's going to change their mind, but the person who is reading the letter, considering sending it, write the questions for that person. So if you ask someone, could you read this letter and send it to your representative? Whether they send it or not is irrelevant in many ways, because the politician is, you know, some staff member is going to read it and maybe it'll have a little impact. But the way you write the questions should be for the person that is just part of your society. They should then have those questions in their mind that you wrote for them, that they will be wondering when they're going to get an answer to those questions. So write your letter not to try to influence and inform. If you read that particular letter, there will be a lot of words in there that people are like, I don't even know what that is. And that's okay, because they're like, I don't even know what this is. But they know that something, why are you keeping this a secret? When are you going to get around to discussing this? You know, the deadline's coming up. Okay, those are things that hit people emotionally. And so write letters to your representatives and your politicians, not for the politician, but for the person reading the letter.
And there's another thing, you can use this also later. So now in Germany, I wrote my letter to the politicians May 2022. A lot of them recognize it. It went a little bit viral, but you can also use it several years later. So if there is a problem, if they're overreacting, whatever, then you can show them later, hey, I asked you these questions 1.5 years before. And if they say, we did not know, sure, you did know this. And that's what the politicians also know. They see that other peoples know what they are doing. And then they cannot go 2 years later, we did not know. German politicians try this all the time. And then you can go to them, hey, I told you, we all told you 1, 2, 3 years before. So they have a little bit more fear if they know they are watched. Yeah? And for your own public standing, it's very good if you can show, hey, we asked this question before. So they don't get out that easy. But that's the strategy. We didn't know nothing, but we did. They did know. And so we tried to tell them, we know what you're doing, and we will come later to you and ask you these questions again. You can maybe ignore us now, but at one point you will not ignore us anymore. And this whole process does a lot to the politicians and also to the other people.
In some nations, I have been told that politicians are obligated to respond to written letters. They may or may not respond to emails. And so, you know, printing up a simple letter and putting it in the post and mailing it may make a difference. It's certainly worth trying.
Yeah, and you also can make appointments with politicians. It's at some point it works. We had this as a positive example in Germany with our vaccine mandate. They tried it too in Germany, but we get a lot of information to the politicians, a lot of calls. Their phone rings the whole day before this parliament thing where they tried to decide this. And this worked. It not only worked with the parties who were against it anyway, it worked also with some other politicians. And at one point, this whole thing collapses because they had a way to get out of this. Email, you can delete it very easily. But if you try to search the contact to them, call them, make appointments, it works with that. It works something in their mind. If a lot of people call them, because normally nobody's interested in normal politicians. They don't get that much mails or information. And with that important topic we have had in the last years, some politicians realize, wow, maybe I should listen a little bit more to the people. And at one point, they will maybe decide against some law. You can do a lot of things on that topic.
All right. Thanks very much.